Hey there, everybody. How's it going? I'm going to wait for some more people to join us before I start running my mouth, because I find otherwise it just means I kind of have to stop and start again and stop and start again. And you know what? That's not really any fun. Okay. So just switching things around here so I don't have to look at certain things on the screen. Great. See, some people are joining us. I'm going to wait until those numbers swell. But, while we're waiting for everybody else, any questions you have, just briefly, you can feel free to type them into the chat window. I'm going to wait until our numbers swell up to about, say 20 or 25. But that usually happens pretty quickly. So how's everybody doing? First of all, how is the post-eclipse treating you? Are you still here? Right? Are you sure you're here? You might want to pinch yourself and see if you're still here, right? Not necessarily Nakshatra Sandhi related discussion. Everybody has different techniques for Nakshatras. That's the great thing about Nakshatras, is there are very few techniques written in older texts about Nakshatras, right? So everybody has all sorts of different Nakshatra techniques. I'm going to share mine. Is anybody else having a problem with the sound? Because somebody else says no sound, but quite often I found that that's just on somebody else's end, because I'm seeing the sound as working on my side. But we need to sort all these things out before we get going. Can anybody else not hearing me? I'm gonna keep running my mouth, see if anybody else says that they don't hear me. It's fine. Okay, so John V87, if you don't have any sound, you need to kind of disconnect and reconnect again. That might be what the issue is, okay? If anybody has any brief questions while we're just kind of waiting for some other people to join us, Namaste, Arjit Sen. Please feel free to just kind of type them in the chat window, not about your own personal chart, okay? But, if you have any general questions, feel free to ask a brief question. I'm waiting for the numbers to get up to about 25 or so, okay? All nakshatras are important. It just depends on the person's chart as to which ones are more prominent. Okay, just waiting till we get a few more people here, and then I will go into kind of sharing my little technique with you. And in addition to that, I will get into my special announcement. I'm getting tongue twisted these days. How was the eclipse for me? Well, off and on intense. It was one of those up again, down again days, but those happen quite often, right? So let's see what we got going on here. I'm waiting for some more people to appear. If it doesn't, kind of get bigger here in the next couple of minutes, then we'll just go ahead and start. But if you have any questions in the interim, simple questions, not me interpreting your chart for you, things like that, not like that, just, kind of anything generally astrology related that you might want to ask in a question and answer session. This is a good time to do it. And then we will go into all the other stuff that we're going to do today. I'm going to share some charts with you today and show you a technique for working with house cusp nakshatras, which I find to be a really wonderful technique. Helps me to get a lot of information out of a chart that otherwise one might be able to, might not be able to, I should say, extricate from a chart. In addition to that, I'm going to have a brief talk about birth time rectification, which kind of ties into showing house cusp nakshatras and explains one of the reasons why it's absolutely so important, right? Can I define the house cusp? That depends on what you mean. If you mean, can I explain what house cusps are? That's definitely important. I will definitely be doing something in association with that. What would happen if eclipse happens in the 6th house? If eclipse happens in the 6th house, you would come on to somebody else's astrology channel and ask them what happens if the eclipse is happening in the 6th house, right? And then they, in an obstructive manner, would say, I'm not going to give you an interpretation based on one point in your chart, okay? It's dependent on a lot of things. I'm not going to get into calculations today. That's too complex, okay? Good book on Myths of the Nakshatras, Myths and Symbols of Vedic Astrology by Bipin Bahari. That's a very excellent book, right? A lot of people have said it's a little too kind of fuzzy and stuff like that, but it's actually one of the best ways to learn nakshatras because it touches on things in a very esoteric manner, which helps you to understand the symbolism and then create the interpretation yourself, which is very important that you do with nakshatras. Okay? Good. People are beginning to pop into the room. We're going to wait about 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes for other people to pop in. But yes, house cusps can give you such great depth in Vedic astrology. They're very vital. Okay? Very vital. Very few good books out there on nakshatras. I'm hoping to write one in the next year or so. I keep having a problem getting started because of large client load and things like that. But it is still in the plans. And while I'm waiting to get it started, I keep coming up with new ways of working with the nakshatras. Okay, so then, by that time it'll be a big book. And that's the problem, is it's likely going to be a very big book, because when I do a book on nakshatras, it's not just going to be an explanation of the nakshatras. It's going to have a lot of different nakshatra techniques that I work with, and I use a lot of different techniques. So it's going to be a rather large book, and it's a rather large undertaking. And I keep trying to get started, but then I have too many clients, and I have an 8-year-old and a lot of responsibilities as one can have with an 8-year-old, and it's just hard to do so much sometimes. Okay, why don't we get started? Okay, why don't we get started? We're going to get started talking about house cusp nakshatras and my special message. What do people want to hear first? Do you want to hear house cusp nakshatras first, or do you want to hear my special message first? You decide. Quick, I'm going to count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and if nobody has decided, then I'm going to decide myself. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. No, only kidding. All right. A special message. Okay. Last time, in between eclipses, that I did a 15% discount on consultations. There was a very large response to that. And a lot of people missed the deadline. And basically, a lot of people were not like seriously miffed or upset that they missed the deadline, but disappointed. So I don't like doing this very often, I have to admit, right? But I figured that what I would do, as we are in between eclipses, and we're always in between eclipses, though, but we're just coming out of an eclipse, and Saturn's getting ready to station direct in a few days. And I figured, sure, why not offer it one more time, right? And I probably, if I ever do this again, it won't be for a very long time, okay? But I am going to offer a 15% discount on consultations. To those of you who are interested in booking. Here is the stipulation. The stipulation is you have to make the booking and pay for the booking by 6 a.m. Pacific time on the 24th. That's the day after tomorrow. So I've widened the window a little bit this time. So 6 a.m. Pacific time on the 24th, if you schedule any of my astrological consultations with me, it will be a 15% discount. But to avail yourself of the discount, you really need to make the payment before 6 a.m. on the 24th. Okay, and this will probably be the last time I do this for a while. But a lot of people requested, and a lot of people sent me emails seeing the video that I did the last time when I offered this. They saw it like 2 weeks later, and they sent me an email asking if it was still available. So, I felt like, okay, well, I'll give people another chance. So that's the special message, and I will, probably mention it again during the course of this video. Okay, so why don't we get into talking about the other bit that we're here for, which is house cusp nakshatras and nakshatras in general. But I do want to ask one more question before we go in. How is the video on everybody's end? Is the video lagging any? Right? Is it like, I'm saying something and then a couple of seconds later it's, my mouth's moving, like a Godzilla movie or something like that? Can you let me know before I go into this? It's kind of a good thing for me to know, so that I know I'm not pointing things out and then it's lagging. Everybody got really quiet all of a sudden, right? So can you let me know if the video is lagging? It's perfect. All right, good. That's good to know. All right, we're going to go into the screen sharing screen. And I'm hoping that it works well, because this is the first time I've used this on Google Hangouts. I'm not going to go into PADAs today. That's not in the plans, okay? Right? And I have a different way of working with PADAs, okay? So let's see if we can get into the screen sharing. All right, let's click that button. Let's click this button. And let's click that. And let's click this. Okay, so, right. Now I'm going to ask, and I'll come back to this, is everybody seeing the chart on the screen? Okay, is everybody seeing the chart? I'm waiting for people to say they can see the chart before I proceed with pointing things out, okay? Can everybody see it? Yes, you can see it. All right, good. Let me make sure I know how to use this before I proceed. Screen sharing, present to everyone, good. Right, now let's see. Right, I'm going to do one thing, and I'll ask one more question, and then we'll be ready to go on this, okay? Right, so now my next question to you is, are you all seeing the screen with the round circle on it? Right, is everybody seeing the screen with the round circle on it? I will wait and see if I get a yes, because once I'm into this, I'm not going to be able to have a chance to check your chat messages for a while. All right, good, good. Right, so let's talk for a second about house cusps. Now, I can't see your chat messages, just so everybody knows. All I can see is the screen. Let's talk for a second about house cusps, what they are, right? They are, I'm going to give a simple explanation. I'm going to give a layperson explanation, so to speak, just to make it simple. They are specifically defined degree points within a Rashi that mark, pardon me, the concrete reality of a particular house, right? Now, that's a very vast statement. So what do I mean by that? They're a little more defined than equal house system. Does that mean that equal house is wrong? No. So don't think that way. I'm not saying do away with equal house, just use house cusps. As a matter of fact, what I'm kind of saying is, on a certain level, you need to use them both side by side. So you need to kind of think along two lines simultaneously without getting a split personality disorder. Ooh, okay, I'm only kidding. So specifically defined degree points within a chart. Within any chart, they can be within divisional charts. They can be within the Rashi chart, okay? Now, some of you may have familiarity with Western astrology, whereas with Western astrology, I'm pointing at this IX here, which is the 9th cusp. In Western astrology, you would have this 9th cusp present. And then there's this MC, which is the midheaven, or the 10th cusp. And in Western astrology, they would say between the 9th and the 10th is the 9th house. We're not doing that. We're just looking at the specific degree point. Okay, so for the intents and purposes that I work with this, we would say that the 9th cusp is conjunct Aquarius. The 10th cusp is conjunct Pisces. The 12th cusp is conjunct Taurus, and so on and so forth. So we're just looking for that degree point within the sign. We're not going, I'm just going to say this once more, we're not going between 10 and 11 is the 10th house, 11 and 12 is the 12th house. We're not doing that. We're just saying a specifically defined degree point. Okay, so I brought this up just to kind of share the general idea of that. So everybody got that particular concept. Okay, so when you go into a Varga chart, say for instance, when you go into the Shastiyamsha chart, okay, you're going to notice something pretty interesting. You have the 6th and 8th cusp in the 3rd equal house. and you have the 11th cusp in the 2nd house, and you have the 1st, 9th, and 10th in the 1st equal house, and you have a whole hodgepodge of all these different things that you begin to go, well, that's really confusing, but it's not. You got to use it all simultaneously. And this is the reason, because what is the 60th divisional chart? What does it do? It takes a zodiac sign, cuts it into 60 equal portions, and it's going to put a planet or indeed a house cusp in a particular Rashi based upon what 1/60th division it's in within the Rashi chart. Okay? So if you're doing a lot of work, which I do some work on a lot of occasions with the Shastiyamsha chart, if you're using the Shastiyamsha chart, you really need a good birth time to use house cusps. But when I rectify people's birth times, I actually verify everything against the Shastiyamsha using house cusps. I verify everything against the Akshavadamsha, which is the 45th divisional chart, using house cusps. And I verify everything against the Kavadamsha, which is the 40th divisional chart, using house cusps. And I also use the relevant Varga for the event and the Rashi chart. So every event, when I do birth time rectification, is checked against 5 divisional charts using transits. And so that means if I've rectified a birth time, it's going to be, you know, generally within 30 seconds of being accurate. Okay. And I do that because that's what I need in order to do the work that I do, right? And just to give you an idea, I use the Shastiyamsha chart in my karmic analysis, but, you know, truth be known, I can do a karmic analysis without it. I just can't look at house cusps or anything like that. I would just be looking at Ketu and Rahu and the planets, which won't change unless they're close to the cusp, right? So here you see that when you look at all these different divisional charts, like the Chaturtamsha, right? Chaturtamsha, things are going to tend to stay relatively in the same place. But here again, you see the 6th cusp in Taurus in the 3rd equal house, right? And, you know, this is different pretty much in every single divisional chart. Okay. Now, if you have Kala, I'm going to show you how to set this up on your screen. If you don't have Kala, I recommend getting it. It's, you know, I feel the finest Vedic astrology software, and I've used most of them. Okay. Kala lets you customize a lot of things dependent upon your calculations, which is what's really good about it. Okay, so we're going to go into our calculation screen. And we're going to look over here where it says house system for Bhava Chalita. In order to use things the way that I use them, you need to tick the box for Campanus. So you want to use the Campanus house system. And for the house cusp, you want to use the middle of the house setting. So middle of house for Campanus, okay? And what that is going to create for you, if you know how to bring a specific thing up on the screen, is what you do is you right-click in a spot. I'm going to right-click here. It brings up a thing that gives you all these options. I'm going to choose Bhava Chalita. And that brings this up down here in the corner. And you'll see it has the word camp in the middle of it. I'm going to put my cursor right over that little white box that says Campanus. And presto changeo, what do we have up on the screen? We have all of our house cusp nakshatras. Okay? We have all of the house cusp nakshatras. Now, I'm going to take advantage of this particular situation to write all of these things down. Okay, 1, Ardra. 2, I thought I'd already written it down, Pusha. 3, Ashlesha. 4, Purva Palguni. 5, Hasta. 6, Vishaka. 7th, Bula. And please pardon my pronunciation. I'm an American and I have really horrible pronunciation. Uttara Ashadha. 9th, Dhanishta. 10th, Purva Bhadrapada. I meant to do this before everybody. Sorry to keep you waiting. 11th, Revati. And 12th, Kritika. Okay, so I've written all that down for myself so that I can refer to it. Now, before I proceed any further, I'm just going to very briefly check the chat window to see how many people have their jaws open, right? dialogue boxes from Kala that pop up. Thank you. I'm glad you said that. All right. So you saw the round circle. Well, now I'm back to the square chart. Okay. Okay. Is everybody seeing the square chart now? Or seeing a chart with house cusp? Maybe you didn't see the house cusp thing pop up. Maybe it's not sharing that, right? But what you do to access that is, I will point out to you here, just a moment. You bring up, you right click in one of the squares on Kala, and it will bring up an opportunity for you to pick something. And you want to pick the Bhava Chalita chart, okay? And that'll bring up the Campanus thing. And you'll see a little white square that says Campanus. You click in the middle of that, and it'll bring up a list of house cusp nakshatras for you. If you want a clear explanation of how to do this, you can also email me, and I'll send you over instructions and everything like that. Let's see what everybody else has to say. Okay, anybody else have anything to say on any of this? Any confusion at all? Anybody feeling lost? Completely lost? They can see the square charts. Good. We've got people saying things. Good. All right. So we're going to go in to explaining things. Now I'm going to take the square box down, since people are saying they can't see it anyway. And we're going to go into looking at things, although I'm going to change this middle chart to the Rashi chart. Okay. Now we're going to look at this person's life between 2012 and 2015. We're just going to pick a very long period of time. Okay, and I'm going to kind of just go through things, kind of give you brief mini lessons along the way, but I may touch on some techniques that you don't really know, but I'm just trying to show you that you can do this using your own techniques too. This works using either a tropical zodiac or a sidereal zodiac. Let's not have any conflict over my zodiac can beat up your zodiac, or your zodiac beat up my zodiac, and now my zodiac is retreating back into its little hidey hole to build up a missile storage in order to attack your zodiac, right? Let's just leave all that at the door, okay? So one of the things we can see with this person's chart, now you're not going to see the Baladi Avastas and Jagradati Avastas probably, because if you can't see pop-up windows on your screen, they're not going to show. But I'll just explain things along the way to you. Venus is in a state that's called Kumara, which basically means that it's youthful. Now, youthful planets in astrology are able to create concrete things. If they're also what is called swapna, which Venus is, then they can equally maintain those things. Okay? So we're going to look at some simple things, just simple astrology first of all. One of the things we're seeing is this person's in their Venus dasha. Now, Venus here is the 5th and the 12th equal house lord. It also happens to be those particular nakshatras as well. And we're seeing, and I'll remind you, the 5th cusp is associated with Hasta nakshatra, okay? And the 12th cusp is connected to Kritika nakshatra, okay? So Venus also is the Putra Karaka. It's an indicator of children. So one of the things that we can see in this person's chart is that basically during their Venus dasha, there can be difficulty for them in having children, bringing the 5th house cusp into the equation with that. In Hasta, you have to take into account the dignity of the moon. I'm doing all this in my head, okay, the well-being of the moon. And there's specific ways to quantify that. I'm working on something that I'm going to release probably later on this year. That is a fine-tuned way of judging nakshatra strength. That's got several months in the making though, but I'm just doing it with you on the spot here. So having children for this individual is likely a struggle during this time. They are trying to be patient with the process because Venus is in the 6th, with the 6th house cusp nakshatra being Vishaka. with somewhat of a challenged Jupiter. And so it has them a little bit confused about ways in which they might be able to increase their chances of how to have a child. They may have equally lost a child along the way. These are all potentials and possibilities, right? But we also know that Venus is the relationship house, relationship indicator, just naturally, right? Sure, Venus is a natural karaka for relationships for men. And in addition to that, Jupiter is the natural indicator for women. But Venus across the board is an indicator of love, okay, and relationships in general. So being in Venus Saturn dasha, that just naturally lets us know that there is a potential for relationship problems. Those are simple things that we know. Venus Saturn dasha brings a potential for individuals to have difficulty within their relationships. So what are we seeing so far? There was struggle perhaps and difficulty with this person having a child. They struggled to do so. It hasn't worked out. And so now they're trying to find ways in which they might be able to, well, do better things with their health regime to increase their opportunities. Now, I've used the 5th house Cusp Nakshatra of Hasta in that interpretation. The 12th house Cusp Nakshatra is Kritika, right? So they're purifying themselves of those things that didn't work. They might even be purifying their diet along the way, but also they're recognizing a painful truth with the recognition that it's difficult for them to have children. All of those things factor into the equation, right? And you can safely say, you know, all of those things to a certain degree, right? This works regardless of which zodiac you're using. Again, I'll state that, okay? So Venus Saturn dasha. Well, basically you have Venus conjuncting Saturn. Now Saturn is the 8th equal house lord in the Rashi chart. Okay, Saturn's in neutral dignity, which means it's going to be somewhat problematic. It's also the 9th equal house lord in the Rashi chart, and it's the 8th and 9th cusp lords too, right? So Saturn, based upon the dignity of a planet, if it rules 2 houses, if its dignity, or I should say well-being, overall strength is more of what I'm saying. If its overall well-being is positive, it's going to manifest more of its positive house qualities. If it's overall more difficult, then it's going to manifest more of its difficult house qualities. Okay, Saturn's going to give a little bit of both. The 9th house is also one's spouse. Okay, 9th house is marriage, relationships that have a purpose. Now, the 9th cusp is in Dhanishta Nakshatra. Okay, and within this particular chart, we've got a fairly strong Mars. Okay, now these 2 individuals may feel like they're just naturally meant to be with each other, right? But still, there's transformation, there's difficulty within the relationship that's going on. And it's meaning they're having to put a lot of effort and energy towards the relationship in order to make it work out, right? So why are they doing that? Well, we have to look at where Saturn rules from Venus itself. And it rules, and this is where you use the equal house more. Saturn rules the 3rd and the 4th equal houses. It's going to manifest a little bit of both. So the 3rd house cusp is Ashlesha Nakshatra. The 4th house cusp is Purva Palguni Nakshatra. So these individuals are going to have to put a lot of extra work into their relationship at that particular time in order to make it work. Now, chances are the relationship will survive, but we're going to go take a look at that here in just a moment, after I go to the main screen and check in on everybody, see how everybody's doing. Oh, good. The Baladi and Jagradati pops up. Yep. I am American. My son's mom is British. I live in the UK. So there is your clarification, right? Do you want to know my sock size? I'm only kidding. I don't mind you asking. I'm just joking. I'm sarcastic, right? I lived a lot of my life in New York State. So, you know, I like sarcasm sometimes. So I hope people understand that. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our chart again. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Navamsha chart. We're going to bring that up on our screen. Oh, so first of all, before I do that, Saturn, now what I'm doing is I'm using a technique that combines Jaimini techniques with Vimshottari Dasha. Okay, Saturn, as per Jaimini techniques, can create separation with those things that it comes into contact with. That is something that will also work with Vimshottari technique. Really, it's also a Parashara technique too. That's what I mean to say. I'm just saying Vimshottari because I'm using Vimshottari Dasha. If Saturn is, say, below being in its own house, like if it's great friend, neutral, etc., it's going to create separation from those things that it comes into contact with. The worse its dignity or the worse its well-being, the worse that separation. So Saturn's creating separation from the relationship. It's equally creating separation from the individual having a child during that time. So we're going to go look at the Navamsha. And we'll get through as much as we can. I may stop with the Navamsha today just because I want to be able to take some questions as well. And just a reminder before we proceed, the special announcement, if you joined us late, is that once again, I'm offering the 15% discount on consultations. I likely won't do this again for a very long time. I'm offering it again because a lot of people missed the first opportunity. So if you want to avail yourself on a 15% discount on consultations, you need to schedule and equally pay for your consultation before 6 a.m. on the 24th of August. That's the day after tomorrow, 6 a.m. Pacific time, the 24th of August. And that's on all of my consultations. Okay, so now here we are within this individual's Navamsha chart. Okay, so we're going to look at the well-being of Venus. Well, we're looking at Venus here. Venus rules the 5th equal house. That's an important relationship house. Most of you don't know that, or I shouldn't say most of you. Some of you may not know that. That's probably the more polite way to say it. That's because it's the Bhavam placement from the 9th house. So the 5th is the 9th from the 9th. Okay? So it's important to relationships. And it's equally placed in a relationship house. But Venus here is responsible for the 5th house. Okay? It's as simple as that. With that 5th house, you've got that, again, you look at the house cusp in order to give the nakshatra interpretation. Even if you're looking at equal house, okay? You look at the house cusp for the 5th equal house. And if we remember, that's Hasta Nakshatra. Now, when the moon, which is connected with Hasta Nakshatra in Vimshottari Dasha, when the moon is somewhat compromised, it makes the indications of Hasta Nakshatra a struggle. Okay, so we're seeing struggles again with relationships. Venus is in Vishaka Nakshatra, which gives Venus the capacity to be a little more patient with the processes that it's working through. Okay, it's also got a good strong Jupiter there supporting it. And as per Jaimini techniques, Jupiter can manifest things that it's connected to. Right? So Jupiter connecting to Venus strengthens Venus in that capacity. Venus, as per Jaimini, brings enjoyment to things. So it can bring enjoyment to the relationship at this particular time. Now, the 7th cusp is in Mula Nakshatra. And so we have to look at Ketu's strength for that. So Ketu's in Pisces. So really what we're doing is, in essence, we're looking at Jupiter's strength. Okay? So that's a strong Mula. So these individuals during this time are going to be determined to work on the fabric of their relationship and try some pretty radical things to help themselves to heal any of the issues that they might have had in association with their relationship. Okay, when we look at Saturn, Saturn is again the 8th Lord from the Ascendant, and it's also the 9th Lord. So that also signifies some form of transformation that they're going through in connection with their relationship. The person whose chart this is may feel like they need a little more attention from their spouse, okay, during this, because the 9th cusp is in Dhanishta Nakshatra. The 8th is in Uttara Ashadha, supported by a sun that is Mula Trikona. So it's a strong sun. It's also Bala, which means it's in its infant state, and it's Jagrat. It can maintain things. It's a healthy sun for all intents and purposes, right? So that can make it so these individuals are determined to work things out. Okay? Saturn here also rules the 5th, the 6th, and the 2nd cusps. The 2nd cusp is in Pusha Nakshatra, right? Pusha Nakshatra makes things sacred. So for the sake of the valuing this relationship, this person may be willing to accept some of the problems and limitations that are going on within their relationship. The 5th we know is in Hasta, and the 6th is in Vishaka Nakshatra. The 5th is creating some struggle. There's struggle, difficulty with the child, as we were seeing before, as a potential. And equally, when we look at the 6th cusp in association with that, the individual is willing to work the process out. Okay. Now, I'm teaching these techniques on a course that I'm doing at the present moment. You're welcome to join into that course late. We're kind of nearing the end of that course, but everything's recorded on video, so you could catch up on video, and I'm happy to offer a reduced price for those of you who are interested in learning this technique. Okay, it's a little more in depth. I can't teach it super in depth here because I'd have to be here for several hours, if you follow. Okay, so because Saturn is placed in the 2nd from Venus, we also have to take that into account. And one of the things that's connected with that is when the Antardasha Lord is in the 2nd position from the Mahadasha Lord, then it can mean that the indications that those two planets are connected with require a lot of responsibility. Okay, so there will be a huge responsibility to relationship in order to maintain the relationship at this point. We remember that 2nd cusp nakshatra is in Pusha Nakshatra, but they will be willing to make sacrifices for the well-being of the relationship. Okay, so equally when we look at this, I'm going to switch screens on us. Let's look at the agenda that is shared between Saturn and Venus in the Navamsha chart. Now we're looking, the Navamsha chart's over here now in one of the small squared charts, but I'm going to bring something up on the screen. Hopefully it will appear. It's a pop-up window showing what those two share in common. Okay. I'm just going to run through the list quickly because I also want to be able to explore the Saptamsha with all of you as well. Okay. So when we look at Venus has a 5th and a 10th and a 12th agenda within the Navamsha chart. So it has an agenda for deciding that the relationship is important, trying to make wise relationship decisions, and equally make sacrifices for the well-being of the relationship, but there can be distance from the relationship during that time. Saturn shares all of the same agenda. Okay, so some of the things that we're seeing are that there may be some distance in the relationship at this point, but it's equally an important relationship for both individuals, so they're willing to put the extra effort into the relationship. All right, now before I go into the Saptamsha, I know everybody would like for me to do North Indian as well. I'm really sorry. It's just, it's kind of, if I do North Indian, then the people who do South Indian won't like it. And plus, South Indian tends to work better for Rashi aspects, and I use a lot of Rashi aspects, okay? So I know that some of you might like for me to do that. I can read North Indian. I'm a little favorited towards the South Indian chart, I have to admit. Because basically it's just easier for me to read Rashi aspects there. I see it at a glance. I don't have to, kind of go looking for it, okay? But if you want to email me, I'll send you a copy of all of these charts in North Indian. All right, you can do that through my website. Let's go look at the Saptamsha. All of us astrologers try to be able to read both, and I can read both, but for the sake of talking to lots and lots of people on YouTube and showing you a technique simply, I would prefer to just kind of gravitate to this. What I can do is when we go back to the main screen, I have a screen that I can bring up both north and south at the same time. I can't do it on this screen though. Okay. So let's see, where we already looked at that. All right, so now we can go back to the main screen. What I can do there is I can bring up south-north. There we go. Now you all have south-north for your benefit. And we're going to change this middle chart here to the Navamsha chart, right? And then we'll go change it to the Saptamsha chart. All right, so let's see what we've got going on here in the Saptamsha chart. We see Venus as the Lord of the 6th and the 11th equal houses. Well, if we understand our houses in general, just a general understanding of houses, the 6th house can be a house of obstruction. The 11th house, that also has a tendency to create further delays, delays that can be overcome, but they take a lot of long-term planning because it's the 6th from the 6th, okay? But Venus is also the 4th and the 6th house cusp lord, right? And we know Venus is the Putrakaraka. That's an indicator of children. Venus here is debilitated because it's in Virgo. So this begins to confirm what we were seeing in association with children. Okay, and let's look at Saturn. Saturn is the 5th and the 6th equal house lord from Venus. So again, we're seeing, not going into house cusp nakshatras yet, we're seeing a problem with children. 5th and 6th combined, a problem with children. Saturn's also the 8th cusp lord. That's meaningful too. Here in a moment, we'll look at what Venus and Saturn share, okay? Venus is in the 10th from the ascendant. Now, here's another little rule for you. If a planet is debilitated, but it's in the 10th, then it can create concrete things in an individual's life just by the sheer sake of being in the 10th house, right? Being the highest up in the sky. Those things will decay with time, but it can create those particular things. All right. So basically, we're seeing some problems in association with the relationship. Another meaningful thing here too is Saturn is the 3rd and the 2nd equal house lord, putting effort towards creating a family, right? And Saturn's in the 2nd from Venus, which shows there is the effort towards trying to make a family as well, all right? But let's look at the 6th and the 11th house cusps in association with this, right? So 6th cusp in Vishaka. Well, Venus is having a hard time maintaining its responsibilities to the 6th and the 11th equal houses and the 4th and the 6th house cusps. Those things are going to have a tendency to fall apart. Now, if the planets ruling those nakshatras are strong, that doesn't mean that it's going to make the concrete thing happen. It means the individual will grow in a very wise manner in association with that planet. The concrete thing is going to be more determined by the planet, whether or not it's created. The growth is determined by the nakshatra. Okay, so the 6th cusp is Vishaka. The 11th cusp is Revati. Okay, both Vishaka and Revati have an energy of patience, waiting for developments. Luckily, we have a strong Jupiter here, and we equally have a strong Mercury. Jupiter's in a Sudajala Saptamsha. Mercury's in an Aja Saptamsha. Those two together means that, you know, the individual finds nourishment within this particular relationship, so they're willing to accept the fact of what's going on. But it's a low period because that planet is debilitated, okay? So Venus is the 6th cusp lord, so they will be patient. They'll be accepting with the process, okay? The 4th cusp is in Purva Palguni Nakshatra. Purva Palguni Nakshatra, pardon me, is a very relationship-oriented nakshatra. And in addition to that, not only does Purva Palguni Nakshatra relate to working with another in connection with the relationship, it also relates to working with oneself. And so there's some interference with that process. The person may feel frustrated with themselves about the child not coming into being. Those things can be a potential, okay? As we looked, Saturn rules the 5th and the 6th from Venus. We've already looked at the 6th. The 5th is Hasta. Again, the agenda of a struggle of creating a child is supported here as well. We're seeing that being created. And Saturn is the 8th cusp lord. 8th cusp can tie into potency on some levels, as well as the 7th cusp, right? The 8th cusp here is in Uttara Ashadha Nakshatra. With that being the case, during these transformations that these two individuals are going through, they're going to try to push against the resistance, and they most likely will continue to still try to have a child, but they will likely find that there are difficulties in the process for them to do so. It really helps being able to look at the nakshatras in association with this, because it gives you a little bit more of the idea of what's going on the emotional level for the individual. So we're going to go take a look and finish up by looking at what Venus and Saturn share as an agenda in the Saptamsha chart. And then I'm going to field questions for the rest of the time. I know this is rather complex. I'm just wanting to show you how profound this can be if you're willing to explore further and get into house cusp nakshatras. Okay, so we know Venus is the Putra Karaka. By that being the instance, Venus can just naturally have a child agenda. Venus also disposits the sun, the Darakaraka, so it has a relationship agenda through doing that. So we're seeing some 6th house connections, we're seeing some relationship connections, and we're seeing some child connections, all with a debilitated planet. So we're seeing some problems having a child that creates some issues within the relationship. Saturn shares in that agenda. We're also seeing Saturn and Venus both having an 8th house agenda. I don't know if everybody can see this. My apologies if you can't. It's just because Google won't show everything when I screen share with this, I guess. But they both have a responsibility. We're seeing 2nd house being created, being triggered by both. We're seeing the 7th house being triggered by both. So it's a lot of responsibility to maintain the relationship. They're trying to create a family. There are some problems along the way. They end up having to make some sacrifices in connection with the relationship. They're really determined to make the relationship work, though, and they're trying to be patient with the process and allow things to develop. I just incorporated all of those house cusp nakshatras that Venus and Saturn share in common, right? And it's because I know this technique for using strength with nakshatras that I have found has proven very accurate. I do plan on sharing this soon. I have a fairly good version of this now that I'm working with, but I want to refine it more before I kind of share it at large. So this is what being able to work with house cusp nakshatras can help you to do within a horoscope. It can really do a lot for you, right? And I'm back to not sharing the screen. So I'm going to go see if any of you out there in YouTube land have any questions. Okay. And while I'm waiting for people to type in their questions, I'm going to repeat the special offer on 15% off of consultations is still going to, not still, it's being offered again. I probably will not do this again for a very long time, if ever at all. And it's available on all my consultations until the 24th of August. That's the day after tomorrow at 6 a.m. Pacific time. You have to both schedule and pay for your consultation before 6 a.m. Pacific time on the 24th. So somebody's saying, how do you calculate the nakshatra degrees when using the tropical zodiac? The same way that I just calculated what I showed you just now. So you use Campanus house system, middle of house calculation. Will the rule of planet debilitated in 10th house valid in Navamsha too? Yes, valid in any Varga chart. How do you calculate nakshatra degrees for divisional charts? You don't, the theory I work with, now I'm going to say this here. Basically, astrologers work with calculations that work for them. I don't believe, my own personal humble opinion, that astrologers should poo-poo what other astrologers' calculations are. I don't think that's ethical. That's what I feel about that. That's just my own personal feeling about it. What I have found works best for me, and that's what I'm going to say, is you take the nakshatra placement from the Rashi chart. It just stays the same. The nakshatra stays the same in the Varga charts. My theory for working with this, the reason I work with this, is based on a understanding that I came to about this myself, and other people may share this understanding. I'm not saying I came up with it or that I invented it. But what I'm trying to say in association with that is that nakshatras are more intricately connected to astronomical things within the chart. And the Rashi chart is the astronomy in the horoscope. So I have found it to work best for my calculations and the things that I'm doing to take the nakshatra placement from the Rashi chart and carry that over into every single divisional chart. Okay? So that's the answer to that question, I hope. Okay? Mercury debilitated in Navamsha 10th in Pisces, sitting with Jupiter and Mars. Yes, the Mercury, whatever Mercury rules, it can create concrete things in association with those things that it's associated with. So it's can bring difficulty to your 10th house, but whatever Mercury rules, basically, I'm assuming as per you're using equal house. If you're using equal house, that's the first and the fourth, right? So security within relationships, Mercury can create that for you during the periods that it's active, but those things have a tendency to fall apart. And equally, if a planet's combust, those areas are going to have difficulties as well. But Mercury would be getting some extra support from Jupiter there. Okay, I'm just going to give you things, you can interpret it yourself. All right, I'm not going to interpret your chart for you. Okay. So anybody else with any questions here? Rahu in Kritika. Okay. Are you saying you have Rahu in Kritika? Or are you kind of going, woohoo, Rahu in Kritika? Right? I don't know. All right. No problem. Anybody else with any questions? I know it's a rather intricate thing. It takes some studying. If you want to learn these techniques more intricately, as I said, I'm doing... all right, I'm going to interrupt myself. Somebody says, I didn't understand. If Sun is in Purva Palguni in Leo and in Navamsha in Sagittarius, yes, if the Sun is in Sagittarius in the Navamsha, it's still in Purva Palguni, because Purva Palguni is an astronomical place, whereas Rashis are just a carving of the Zodiac. Okay? So nakshatras are connected to fixed stars, right? So I find it better for the techniques that I use to keep it associated with the nakshatra placement in its Rashi chart. But you're asking, would it be in 1414 in Sagittarius? No, it's not. Just the degrees are calculated differently in the divisional charts. It's not going to matter what degree that Sun is at in Sagittarius in the divisional chart. It's still going to be in Purva Palguni. Right? But you have to calculate degrees differently. That Sun might be at 28 degrees. I don't know. I can't do that math in my head. Yeah, you have to have astrological software do it for you. Okay? And the astrological software should calculate house cusp for you. Most astrological software has that. That's it. Nakshatra stays the same across all charts, in my opinion. Now, somebody else may tell you, nope, you change nakshatras in the divisional charts. If you're learning a technique from them, listen to them, because they're giving you the wisdom, right? Have respect for the person who's teaching it to you, because they're teaching you the technique based upon their calculations. All right? Okay, so let's see. All right, good. I forgot what I was saying a second ago. But everybody can just keep asking questions if you want to. If it's important, I'll remember it. Okay? So just to repeat, I'll say it again, 15% discount on all consultations. You have to schedule and pay by 6 a.m. on the 24th of August. And basically, if you look at, if you're watching this on YouTube, there's a link further down. If there is not a link where you're looking at it, just go to AuthenticAstrology.com. You can get to my services page from there. No, Arjit Sen. I was not telling everybody else to respect me. Okay. I was saying, if you're learning something from somebody, learn it as per the system that they're giving to you, right? Then test it on your own if you wish to test it on your own using your own things, right? But if somebody's teaching you a system, they're teaching you a system in terms of how it works with the manner in which they came up with it, right? Does that make sense? I hope you understand. Okay. If the ascendant lord of D1 is debilitated in D9, what are the general significations? I really don't want to give that because it involves knowing what else is Rashi aspecting so much, okay? Venus debilitated, but in its own nakshatra, Purva Palguni, what can one expect in terms of strength? Well, a debilitated planet is always going to be compromised, even if that planet is Yuva. If that planet is Yuva, which means it's youthful, which kind of adds to judging its strength, it's still going to be compromised. So it's going to be a weak planet. A weak planet ruling a nakshatra is going to make the growth of that particular planet difficult. Okay? If you have, here's a little trick. Aye, teacher, you're funny. Okay? Right. So if you have a strong planet in a nakshatra disposited by a weak planet, so the nakshatra dispositor is weak, but the planet that's in that nakshatra is strong, that planet is going to try to compensate for the weakness it's encountering through the nakshatra. Okay? If you have a strong nakshatra dispositor but a weak planet, then the individual, even though they're going through difficulty, will grow very intensively through that difficulty. They'll learn a lot through that process, okay? Why is Jupiter transit over natal moon considered bad? I didn't know it was, really. It depends on where Jupiter rules in your chart, perhaps. If Jupiter is ruling a difficult house, it might create some difficulties, right? It can make you a little more emotional, a little more reactive, things along those lines, but I wouldn't say it's bad. You know, quite often people try to get into these cookbook techniques with astrology, and they don't always work. You've got to take them in context of the chart. Somebody has a question. I have my moon exalted in Taurus in birth chart in 11th and in Scorpio in D60 conjunct Rahu in the 4th house. How would I rule the overall strength of the moon? That's too intricate for me to do off the top of my head. I wouldn't be ruling the overall strength of the moon. It's going to be different in each divisional chart. Right? If you've got a weak moon in the Shastayamsha chart, though, that is going to limit the moon because it lowers the ceiling. And I kind of taught this in my conversation yesterday, but I'm going to repeat something about the Shastayamsha chart, which is it sets the ceiling for all the other divisional charts. And I like using the analogy of imagine having a 7-foot tall basketball player, and he's in a 10-foot high room. The room has a 10-foot high ceiling, which means the basketball rim is right next to the ceiling. There's a very low ceiling. If he jumps up and tries to even get the ball into the basket, first of all, he'd have to deflate the air out of the basketball, and he'd probably hit his head on the ceiling and not be able to get the ball into the basket, right? But if you put that same basketball player in an arena where the ceiling is, you know, very, very, very high, they're not going to have any problem at all. And it's similar with the Shastayamsha chart. It sets the ceiling for all the other planets, okay? I didn't talk about the debilitated ascendant lord in the D1, Tajana, all respect due, because the thing is it really requires analyzing the full horoscope to give you a clear understanding of that. Yes, in one place it can be exalted, in the other it's debilitated. And yes, that can make it confusing, but it's going to be, so if it's debilitated in the Shastayamsha, that weakens it in the Rashi chart. That's a good way to understand it, right? But planets can be exalted in one chart and debilitated elsewhere. It's a thing of understanding what the Rashi chart is about, in my opinion. So disclaimer notice, in my humble opinion, the Rashi chart is a Varga chart like all the other charts. It's a Varga chart for the life path of the individual. We can't just look at the Rashi chart to see if something's going to happen. Right? So we don't just look at the Rashi chart, and if we see problems with relationships, we go, oh, your relationship's going to fall apart, right? The Navamsha and the Saptamsha are going to have a greater say in that because they give more of the details of the situation. What the Rashi chart shows us is on your life path, on the path to you becoming yourself, which is what the Rashi chart is about, you're encountering difficulties with relationships. Then you go look at the Varga charts in order to get the full picture of what's going to happen, okay? Okay, yes, I'm saying the moon will not perform as well. Okay, it could be the moon conjunct Rahu and Scorpio in the D60. Okay. What is most spiritual nakshatra according to you? All the nakshatras are spiritual. Okay, that's a simple answer to that. It might be a better question to ask me what my favorite nakshatra is, and if I answered that, I'd probably say it's a different nakshatra in every, dependent upon the period of time that I'm in. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Radhika's saying, don't worry about debilitation. You know, I would say don't worry about anything at all. You may go through difficulties in life, but you learn from your difficulties. Everything that comes your way is prosperity, even if it sucks. Okay. Navamsha and Saptamsha is a detailed explanation of it's a detailed explanation of relationship factors in children. Yes, among other things. Okay. And I'm also teaching an extensive Varga course too. You're welcome to join that one late and catch up with the videos. And you can learn all these things, okay? And yes, the D60 is the ceiling for the promise in all the charts. It's the ceiling for the promise of that planet, ceiling for the promise of that house cusp, right? Which doesn't mean this. Here's a good use of the Shastyamsha, is that if you look at a particular indication of a planet, and you're seeing that that planet could be, work out okay, and it could also create difficulty, and you're confused. Is it going to work out okay, or is it going to create difficulty? Well, you can go look at it in the Shastyamsha. And if that planet is strong in the Shastyamsha, it would give more energy towards it working out okay. All right. Am I teaching a Nakshatra course? I have taught a Nakshatra course. It is available on video if you're interested in it. You can email me through my website. I'm going to teach another one probably in March or April next year. I'm thinking about putting the promotional information out about all those things very soon. Okay, so I'm going to have to go, everybody. If you're interested in any of the courses, please go to my website. Contact me through my website. I can't offer a discount on the courses other than the discount that you will get because you're having to catch up on it. Right? But in other words, the 15% discount I'm giving on consultations doesn't apply to the courses. But I am offering a 15% discount for those of you who missed it on all consultations through my website because a lot of you missed it the last time. This will probably be the last time that I'm going to do this for a very long period of time. And if you want to take advantage of it, you need to schedule through my website and pay prior to the 24th of August at 6 a.m. Okay? Pacific time. Okay? Punarvasu Nakshatra can be about things repeating itself, but not always. Okay? Got to go, people. See you next time. Namaste. Take care of yourself.